And we also have here today Jess Booth, who's our new program assistant this year. Okay. So just a bit of housekeeping for now. If everyone just want to keep themselves on mute until the end when we have questions, that would be awesome. And then that'll decrease feedback as well. There'll be polls and quizzes throughout the presentation. So those will pop up as a box on your screen, and you can exit or move those around if they're in your way. Yeah, in case they're covering photos or something like that. And so I'll start with an introduction to CSISS and give you a bit of a background on our organization. And then I'll talk a bit about just what invasive species are in general. And then we'll go into some plant ID, and then we'll talk about best practices that you can do to prevent the spread of invasive species along trails. I'll talk a bit about reporting options as well, and then we'll try and leave a good portion at the end just for questions. Yeah, and like I said, Jess will be monitoring the chat box, so if you do have questions that pop up during the presentation, you can put those in there, and then we'll try to address all of them at the end. Okay. So the Columbia Shuswap Invasive Species Society is a non-profit society, and we're a network of partners who facilitate the prevention, reduction, and management of invasive species. And we do this through collaboration, education, and engagement. And we engage with public and private landowners, government, Indigenous Peoples, stewardship group, and many other organizations. So our purposes are to educate, engage people about the impacts of invasive species and to establish and operate invasive species management programs. And currently we have 3 programs, one of them being our outreach program, and then the other 2 are our terrestrial and aquatic program. Our outreach program focuses mainly on education and community engagement. We do things like visit garden centers, host community weed pulls, we host youth and school presentations. And then our terrestrial program mainly focuses on monitoring and facilitating the management of invasive plants. And our aquatic program is mainly focused on monitoring lakes in the region for invasive mussels. And we also do some monitoring and surveys for invasive clams and other invasive species like American bullfrogs and some aquatic plants as well. So this is where our location or our organization is located, and we're one of many different invasive species organizations throughout the province. So if you're not located in our region, you'll likely have a RISO or Regional Invasive Species Organization, or perhaps a branch of the regional district that completes similar work in your area. So I'm going to do the first poll right now, and you guys can let me know where you're from. So that should be popping up on your screen. Awesome. I'll give it a minute for everyone to answer. Cool. So you should be able to see the results there now. So it doesn't look like anyone's located in Golden, which is interesting. And there's lots of people from outside our region. So at the end, actually, when I follow up with some resources through your emails, I'll let you know where the other regional organizations in the province are, and give you some contacts of who might be good to contact in your area. Okay. So I'll just do a bit of background about invasive species in general. So an invasive species is any non-native organism that causes economic or environmental harm and can quickly spread to new areas of BC. And they adversely affect and cause damage to the habitats in which they invade. And invasive species have a few distinct characteristics that allow them to outcompete native species. So one of the characteristics is fast growth and rapid reproduction. So many invasive plants, for example, produce a really high number of seeds, and that allows them to outcompete native plants. They also can have high dispersal ability. So some species, such as birds or flying insects, are able to disperse far and wide just due to their own biology. And then other species, like invertebrates or plants, are actually assisted by humans and transported either accidentally or on purpose to new areas. And invasive species are usually really adaptable as well, so they can tolerate a wide range of environmental conditions. And they also may not have pathogens or predators in their new environment. So because they haven't co-evolved alongside other organisms in their environment, they might not recognize them as a possible prey species. So they have that advantage over native species. And I just wanted to mention that there's many non-native species that do not become invasive. So a lot of our food crops, for instance, are not originally from here, but they don't escape cultivation and become a problem. In fact, many of them are kind of hard to grow. And so for non-native species to be considered invasive, it has to have some sort of negative impact on either the environment or the economy, or have a social impact. So I'll just go over each of these and give you some examples. So invasive species are actually the second greatest threat to global biodiversity after habitat loss. And biodiversity can be described as the variety of life on Earth and the number and variety of plants and other animals or organisms that exist and their relationship to each other. So, as I said, invasive species reduce biodiversity. So the photo on the left there is a nice alpine meadow that's naturally diverse with lots of different species of flowers and grasses and things like that. And then the photo on the right is an example of what can happen once an native or an invasive species is introduced. So they have the potential to outcompete all of the other native species and create what's called a monoculture. So you can see that this invasive plant is really the only thing growing in that area. So one of the impacts is invasive species can have is social impacts. Giant hogweed, for example, is an invasive plant that causes photosensitivity on your skin if you touch the sap on the plant, and it produces a burn-like rash when you go into the sun. So it creates, it makes you just like very sensitive to the sun. And there's lots of other poisonous and toxic invasive plants. Another example of a social impact is impacts to recreation. So Eurasian water milfoil can make lakes unsuitable for recreation. And there's another plant called Puncturvine, which I'll speak about in detail later. But when it invades a trail system, it can make decrease the recreation because it has seeds that are really sharp and they can pop tires or like stick into your feet or the paws of animals and things like that. So it can actually cause trail closures. The third impact is our economic impacts, and there's quite a number of different economic impacts that invasive species have. Knotweed is just one example. It's pretty common in our area. And it impacts infrastructure. So it can actually push up through concrete and roads, and this can decrease the land value and be really costly and difficult to control. And as I mentioned earlier, our aquatic field program is mainly focused on monitoring for invasive mussels, and these have not yet been detected in our lakes in BC. They were introduced into the Great Lakes region and have since spread to many provinces and states, but they're not yet in BC or Alberta. And they have these, what's called a bicycle thread, so they can actually attach to hard substances or hard surfaces, and they alter food webs and displace native plants and wildlife, and they can pollute drinking water, clog pipes. They would affect agriculture and irrigation systems. So they just have a number of different impacts. Yeah. So I just wanted to do another poll now and just see what everyone's interest is in regards to invasive species. So if you're interested in invasive plants or restoration, so you can answer this. And I'll just give this a few minutes for everyone to answer. Okay, I've noticed somebody put in the chat that my audio is a little bit hard. I'll try and just keep my computer close and see if that helps, but maybe so if you guys want to just type in if you can hear me or not. Okay. So lots of folks are interested in terrestrial plants, which is great. Yeah, we have a number of different interests here, including terrestrial fauna and restoration. Lots of people interested in land and resource management, which is great. Okay, sounds like my volume is varying when I move around, so I'll try not to move around. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have 3 different invasive plant management areas in our region. So we break down our whole region into the Golden IPMA, Revelstoke IPMA, and Salmon Arm IPMA. And we prioritize invasive species based on several different factors. So whether they're new and less established species, the effectiveness of control options, the risk for not managing, and as well as priorities in neighboring regions. And we also get local input for prioritizing plants. So we host a land manager meeting every year to discuss the prioritization of different species in the region, and we get input from various groups and land managers who work in the region. So I'll just go over really quickly what the different definitions are. So the first category is high risk invasive or regional EDRR, and EDRR stands for early detection rapid response. So this is a high risk invasive plant species that's currently not known within our region, or it's a brand new incursion with a limited extent, so less than 10 very small sites within our region. And the management objective for a species in this category would be eradication. And the second one, eradication or annual control are species that are known within the IPMA, but very limited distribution. So the management objective is to control the sites annually. And then our third category is containment. So these species are abundant with no expectation of eradication in certain portions of the IPMA, but have not yet infested all the potential habitats. So you want to treat all incursions that are outside the containment lines. And then the fourth category are species that are widespread beyond the landscape level control. But land managers might choose to treat these species at high-risk priority sites, especially if it's wildlife habitat or corridors of spread. Something like that would be a gravel pit or along highways, or if it's adjacent to agricultural land. So if there's a risk of that species affecting agriculture. And yeah, so it's based on land management objectives. And then we have another core category, which is for species where we have insufficient information. Yeah, so we just get more info about these species over time, and they might change out of this category into a different one. And somebody asked me what EDRR stands for, and that's Early Detection Rapid Response. Okay, so we and other land managers in the region use what's called integrated pest management for invasive plant control, which combines mechanical options such as pulling or digging with potential chemical options like herbicides, as well as biological control. And biological controls, that's introducing a species that either competes or might be a predator or a pathogen for that species. And then the specific control method used at a site on a given day is determined in collaboration with the land manager and can be really dependent on the site. Yeah, so it's kind of a site-specific approach, and it's, yeah, there's a lot of factors that go in into deciding how you're going to treat a particular plant or a particular infestation. Okay, and I'm just going to go over, before we go into the plant ID, some really basic terms that I'm going to be referencing. So there's different kinds of roots that plants have. Some of the plants I'll talk about have a taproot, and that's when the primary root grows longer than the secondary roots. And then other plants may have a fibrous root system, and that's where the secondary roots continue to grow. Lots of grasses have that kind of root system. And it's really important to know to consider root system when you're thinking about management and controlling, because some plants that would have a taproot or a really long taproot, that means you'd have to dig quite deep and make sure you get every part of that root to make sure that the plant grows, doesn't grow back. And then there's also a couple different types of lateral roots. So there can be rhizomes, which are underground roots, or stolons, which are above. So if you can imagine, if this is a plant infestation you're trying to dig out, you want to make sure you get all of the lateral roots, the ones that are underground and above ground. Okay, and then for leaf structure, a simple leaf is an undivided, although the margins may be toothed or lobed. And then a compound leaf is divided into several leaflets. And each leaf, whether it's simple or compound, will have a bud or stipule at its base on the twig, there. But there would be no buds at the base of each of these leaflets in this compound leaf. And for leaf arrangement, they can be alternating along the stem, opposite, or whorled. And there's many different types of inflorescences as well. I won't describe all of these, but you'll have these presentation slides after if you're interested in learning more about that. Yeah, and knowing the plant life cycle is really important for identification as well as management. So annual plants are plants that perform their entire life cycle within a single growing season. And then at the end of the season, the entire plant will die. And then biennials are plants that require 2 years to complete their life cycle. So in the first year, they'll have a small rosette. And then the second year, the stem grows, they'll flower and then go to seed and then die off. And then perennials are plants that persist over many growing seasons. And generally, the top portion of the plant might die back over the winter and then regrow in the following spring from the same root system. Okay, so I'm going to go over a few different plant species of note that generally grow that you might see along trails and trail systems or recreation areas in our region. And some of these are important too because they might be toxic to horses or livestock or humans. So we'll go over blueweed, Hoary Alyssum, Burdock, Himalayan balsam, and yellow flag iris. And then I'll also speak a little bit about Puncturvine. Okay, so burdock is probably a pretty familiar plant to many of you. It's really common in our region as well as just in BC. And it's known for its clinging burrs that attach to clothing and animals. And its burrs were actually the inspiration for the product Velcro. And each plant can produce up to 16,000 individual seeds. And so those burrs attach to you or to animals. And then as you walk, the seeds fall out, and that's how it distributes itself along trail systems into new areas. It's considered a noxious weed in many regions of the province. It's actually native to Asia and Europe, and it's commonly used. Sorry, I'll just show you some more photos of it here. So this is what it looks like in the first year. So it's a biannual plant. So this is its rosette phase. And it kind of looks a lot like rhubarb. A lot of people confuse it with rhubarb when it's just in its first year of growth. And then these are the seeds that it produces in its second year. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's native to Asia, and its taproot is actually commonly used in cooking. I've tried it, it's actually quite good. And so for control for this plant, you want to dig out any rosettes, making sure you get the whole root. And if it's in second year of growth, you can cut it, and just making sure that none of the burrs are spreading or attaching to you, and you're not helping the plant distribute itself. Okay, so as I mentioned, the burrs can attach to animals. They often cling to dogs or to livestock. And when it affects livestock, it can actually really impact their health as well as their value. And it also can impact birds and bats. So a burr on a dog is not a very big deal, but a burr attached to a bird or a bat can actually cause them to die because they won't be able to fly if they're caught up in the burrs. So it's really sad. You might not think about that, but it can actually really impact those species. Okay, so blueweed is another plant that's commonly found in Salmon Arm and in Revelstoke. And Revelstoke, it's along the Greenbelt Trail, and in Salmon Arm, it's found in the South Canoe Trail system, which is a popular biking area. And it's covered in stiff hairs that face downwards. It grows up to 1 meter tall, and it has blue flowers on a spike. And it's a pretty heavy seed producer, so it can produce up to 2,000 seeds per plant, and it reduces wildlife and livestock forage. It's another biennial plant, so that photo there on the left is what it looks like in its first year, and then on the right is when it's flowered. So it actually contains a compound that's toxic to horses and cattle. So it's one that's of note if you have it in a pasture. And for control options, you actually want to wear gloves and cover any exposed skin if you're mechanically pulling it out, because those hairs that are on the plant can actually cause itching and rashes. And hand pulling can be effective for small infestations. And then for larger infestations, cutting may decrease the seed production, but successive treatments are probably required due to the high volume of seed production. And for larger infestations, you might want to consider herbicide. Okay, so the next plant is called Hoary Alyssum. These are an annual to short-lived perennial. They have small white flowers that have deeply notched petals. So you can see those are kind of the deep notches in those petals. And it's important because it's toxic to horses. And it can cause fever, edema, and laminitis. And it's an annual to short-lived perennial. So that's what it would look like. Sorry, I was just getting a bit of feedback there. This is what it looks like in its rosette stage. And then the photo on the right is when it's flowered. And the whole plant is covered in these kind of star-shaped hairs that make it rough to the touch. And then it has these small gray leaves that clasp closely to the stem and they face upwards. And it can grow up to 0.7 meters in height at maturity. And the stems are single or multiple, and they're really thin and arise from the base of the plant there. Yeah, and I just wanted to talk a little bit more about its toxicity to horses. So it's toxic when they graze the fresh plant in pastures. And just as a rule of thumb, like livestock generally tend to avoid plants that are poisonous and favor things that are more palatable and nutritious instead if there's an option. But if that's the only thing that their only option to eat, then they could consume quite a bit of it. And then most of the poisoning cases actually happen when it's found in dry hay. So it's still toxic when it's dried and present in hay. And this is just what a big kind of patch of it looks like. Okay, so the next species is called Himalayan balsam. So it has reddish and hollow stems and orchid-like flowers, and it has leaves that are in whorls. And something interesting about this plant is it has popping seeds. So when the plants are mature, if you touch the seed pod, it actually explodes, and that's one of the ways that it distributes itself. So it's important because it can cause erosion and it tends to invade wetland habitats. So it grows in ditches or along trail systems that have a stream along them. And it's very easy to pull, so it has a really shallow root system. And that's actually why it can cause erosion, because since it's an annual plant, it will take over a bank or a ditch. And then at the end of the year, the whole plant dies out and there's no roots keeping the soil there. So if it rains a lot, that whole bank could wash away and become eroded. And so this plant is found along several sort of trail systems in Salmon Arm, as well as in Revelstoke. It's found along the green belt and in a few different neighborhoods. But it is actually quite easy to control if it's a small infestation. The seeds don't, I think they last around 3 years in the soil. So if you keep on treating it mechanically and preventing it from going to seed, you can actually prevent it from establishing and keep that population in check. Maybe you guys can just type in the chat box and let me know how the sound's going. I've tried to stay a bit closer to the computer. Okay, someone said it's better. Great. Okay. All right, so the next plant I'll talk about is called the yellow flag iris. And this is found in wetland areas and in trail systems with waterways and salmon arm. Notably, it's found along the Turner Creek Trail system and in Garden Lake and the White Lake and Little White Lake, as well as Macquarie Lake. It was introduced as an ornamental, and it's just spread into natural wetland habitats. And it also invades ditches and lake shorelines. And the plant, it produces through seeds, but it also produces through horizontal roots, like the rhizomes that I was speaking about earlier. So actually there can be kind of like a really big patch of yellow flag iris that's all interconnected. So it's actually quite hard and challenging to dig up. You might think you have the whole plant, but there's a ton, like a whole mat, like floating kind of island of rhizomes. Yeah, and it's quite distinct. So it has these sort of sword-like blade leaves and these bright yellow iris flowers. It can grow up to 150 centimeters tall, and it reduces water quality and wildlife habitat. So it takes over the areas where some wetland wildlife would normally use for nesting, and it doesn't create as good nesting material and habitat as other native species would. So this is just another picture of what it can look like if there's a dense patch of it. And it's also toxic if it's ingested by livestock or humans. And it can cause skin sensitivity or dermatitis if you're handling it. So you want to wear gloves if you're around it. Okay. So this is another species, and it's not actually in our area yet. So this is what we would call a regional EDRR. In BC, it's found in the Okanagan Valley as far north as Vernon, as well as in the lower Similkameen region. And it's important because its seeds are very spiky and they can actually puncture tires, so hence its name, Puncturvine. And it can lead to trail closures. So we're really happy that we don't have it in our region, and we don't want to see it establishing here. So it has these 5-petaled yellow flowers, and the leaves are opposite, and it kind of creates like a creeping mat system, and it'll cover the whole sort of trail floor. Yeah, and the stems are greenish red, and it can spread up to 2 meters. So it can create these kind of like pretty lengthy mats on the ground. Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of trivia here. We'll start the first question and see how much you guys have retained from what I've been saying. Okay, so most people were right. Burdock was the inspiration for Velcro. It very well could have been Puncturvine though, because it does attach to you too. Right. Okay. So this is for any of the people that have horses or livestock. Awesome. So majority of people got it right. So blueweed and Hoary Alyssum can both be toxic to horses and livestock. we've got one more trivia. All right, so most people got that as well. Puncturvine isn't currently known in our region, so that's one that we really want people to look out for and report it if you do see it. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a bit about best practices for reducing the spread. So as I mentioned, recreation can be a pathway of spread of invasive plants along trail systems. So when your shoes or gear, such as ATVs or bikes, carry mud, you can also be carrying seeds of invasive plants. And when you leave the trail system without cleaning that off, you risk spreading those to new areas. And camping gear is actually another way that invasive plants can spread. And in some other countries like New Zealand, they actually have really strict regulations surrounding invasive species. So when you arrive there, when you get off the plane, they actually check all of your gear and they make you unpack your camping gear in your tent and shake it out and brush your boots off and making sure you're not bringing any invasive species in with you. So that's good. And we don't have that kind of mentality around invasive species here yet. So it's really just up to us to try and do our best to prevent spreading through our gear and through recreation. So we have an outreach program called Play Clean Go. And this is a program that aims to educate mountain bikers, hikers, and outdoor enthusiasts to clean their gear before leaving trails to help reduce the spread of invasive species. So encourage people to arrive with clean gear, to stay on designated trails, and to use boot brushes if they're provided at the trail system. And those are actually horse hoof picks, but they're really handy. They're small, you can carry them around with you and use them to clean off your tires or your boots. And also encouraging folks to remove any plants. So plant fragments can also be spreading new species. Removing plants or potentially animals or mud from bikes, boots, gears, pets, and vehicles. And you want to do this before entering and before leaving the recreation site. This is our region in British Columbia, as I mentioned. So it encompasses Golden, Revelstoke, and Suquamish Salmon Arm area. And all of these areas are year-round tourist destinations. We have 3 national parks as well as several easy parks that see hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of visitors every year. And it's really known for its extensive hiking and biking and trail systems. And it's, a destination for all kinds of recreation. And we're really lucky in our region to have vast areas of really beautiful outdoor spaces like alpine environments. And we really want to make sure that it stays this way. And Revelstoke in particular is situated in the world's only temperate inland rainforest. So it has a really unique ecosystem. And we really want to work to protect it against the impacts of invasive species. And the Play Clean Go program is really focused on recreation and trail users, and it's a really important part of our outreach programming. So one of the things that we've done is over the past few years, we've installed boot brushes and signs at a lot of the major trailheads in the region. This is just a map of where all of those are. There's probably more now as well, but there's quite a number of them. So if you visit a trailhead, you might see one of these little signs with an attached boot brush. And that's so that you can clean your bike or your boots when you're entering and leaving. And most people clean their bikes or their ATVs at home, but there is several bike wash stations as well to be aware of. So this is one at RMR, and it's just really great and good practice to be using those resources where they're available. And another thing, we're having 3 boot brush stations, so a big kiosk with a brush attached to the bottom there. And those are being installed in a few locations in the Shuswap and then one at Revelstoke as well. And there's, some BC Parks and Parks Canada are also installing these in several different locations in BC and across Canada and in North America. So it's really great to see those being installed and being utilized by people. So the last thing I want to speak about before we go to questions is just reporting. So when you're out on trails or in recreation areas and you might see a plant that you don't recognize, or you're just curious if it's native or invasive, you can use the Report a Weed app. So it's an app you can download on your smartphone, and it shows, you can search plants by flower color or name, and then you can actually report through the app, or you can report, if you are in our area, you can report any plants or animals directly to us, and we'll do our best to try and identify it. And it's great to have people sending us reports and letting us know what they're seeing. And we also do a bit of keeping track of invasive animals as well. So if you see a bird or something, some sort of creature that you don't recognize, you can report that to us as well. And there's a provincial database that's used for tracking and mapping the long-term monitoring and growth of invasive plants called IAP, but this system's actually being phased out and there's a new system coming soon. I guess we're on to questions. So I'll see, Jess, if anything popped up on in the chat box.
Yeah, there are a few questions.
Okay.
One wanted to expand on how yellow flag iris affects water quality.
Okay. I can follow up with some more detailed information about that for you. But from what I understand, I think we can decrease and alter the oxygen levels in the water chemistry. So that can really have an impact on fish or wildlife in the areas where it's growing, if it's growing in really dense quantities.
Kim, this is Bev Lyons from Vernon.
Hi, Bev.
Hi. When you suggest that things can be removed mechanically by pulling them, how do you suggest that those weeds be disposed of?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So in our region and in many other regions, it's free to dispose of invasive plants at the landfill. So you just want to make sure that they're bagged up and you're not losing any debris. And then you let the attendant know that you have invasive plants, and they'll, depending on what it is, they might take it to burial, like if you're bringing in knotweed, or they'll just dispose of it in like the household waste so that it's not going in the compost pile and ending up in a community compost where those plants are going to get spread. And that's the case for many other regions in the province as well. So you just want to make sure that you're not bringing those and like potentially introducing them to other areas. So you especially don't want to take an invasive plant out of your garden and put it in a compost where it's going to get spread. So yeah, if it's just one plant, say, you can put it in your garbage, but if you've got a whole truckload, just take it to the landfill.
That's going into the what do you call it? Yard waste compost is what's happening in Vernon right now, because there is a cost for
really?
Elsewhere. Yeah, so that's something that I'm trying to work on in our area.
Yeah, and I think that used to be the case in our area as well. And then we would have days like specifically that were free that people could take them, but now it's just free all the time. So yeah, that can be a barrier for people for sure if they don't want to pay to dispose of them. And that can be how people end up dumping invasive plants and then they grow on like a Forest Service road or somewhere far away. So yeah.
How do you suggest that we might get that changed? What method would you suggest?
I think I'm pretty sure in our region, it just took a little bit of time of working with the regional district. That happened before I started working with CSISS, so I don't actually know what the process was.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you could always, if you're hosting a weed pull, would suggest you just contact them and ask if you can dispose of them for free. Yeah, that could be an option, but yeah, long term, it would be great if it was free everywhere to dispose of invasive plants. So that's definitely something to work towards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we get the PowerPoint, this PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Can we online or something?
Yeah, for sure. So we're actually recording the presentation. So that'll be available. I'll send that out to you guys. Also send, actually, that's my next slide. Our contact info is here, and then I'll be following up hopefully within the next few days with priority species list for our region. And then a top invasive plants poster that has control methods. Some Play Clean Go resources. I noticed somebody asked about sending some Play Clean Go resources, so I'll definitely send those over. And then you guys can include those in things like your newsletter, absolutely. And then I'll either send this recording or send a link to our YouTube where it'll be, so you guys can always reference it. And I'll try and also make a PDF of the presentation.
Thank you, it's excellent.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so somebody else asked, have we seen more industry trucks wash off, or how do you tell forestry to do the same? Yeah, so for the forestry industry, we do quite a bit of outreach to forestry companies and forestry workers. And that's similar to the Play Clean Go program. It's just called Work Clean Go. So it's encouraging forestry workers or anyone who might be in contact with invasive plants to clean their equipment before they move to a new area. And actually that's how we've seen some invasive plants spread on our throughout our province, is through forestry equipment. So that is a really good thing to be aware of if you're working in forestry. And somebody's just asking me to go back to the app, so I will go there. Yeah, so that's what it looks like. It's a kind of a stop sign with an AIS. And I should mention there's a reporter weed app, but there's also report invasives. So the reporter weed app just has plants, but the report invasive has animals and all sorts of different things that you can report. So that app is actually what I would prefer to use. And somebody said, ensure to remove invasive plants before they go to CSISS. Yes, of course, that's a really good point. I'm not sure if I mentioned that at any point, but yes, you want to be removing invasive plants before they go to seed. That's always a really great practice, especially because some plants can have a seed bank of up to 30 years. So even if you're pulling the plants, they can be popping up for quite a long time if you don't get them before they go to seed set. Okay, so somebody else asked, is there anything else you can do besides reporting to get rid of or control invasive plants in public areas or parks, or just reporting them? Reporting them is a good place to start because then it'll be identified. So you might see something like plants can be hard to tell apart. A lot of them look really similar. So having them properly identified is a really good first step. And then as far as controlling them in public areas and parks, if you're not a land manager, of that area. If you're in our region or in other regions, you can contact your local invasive species society or CSISS if you want to be like, if you're interested in hosting a weed poll, and we can help facilitate that depending on where it is and what the species is. Yeah, some species might be toxic and it might not be a good idea to involve a lot of folks in controlling them, but yeah, it's definitely reported. Depending on the species, you could maybe host a weed poll, or yeah, it might just be brought up as some sort of management objective for the future. Does that answer your question? Okay. Somebody else asked, arrange a weed poll with the RDNO. Yeah, okay, so if you're in Vernon, you can contact the regional district of the North Okanagan, and they might be able to coordinate to pick up the bags. So that's great. That's not in our region, so I'm not totally sure on that, but that could be a good option for sure. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through the questions. Jess, do you see any other ones that I missed?
Sorry. There's
Okay.
one there asking, does IAS identify invasives for the Okanagan region?
Yeah, so it's a provincial app. So it's invasive species in the whole province. So yeah, it's a really, really great tool for anyone living in BC. Okay. Who controls invasive mammal species in the area? So the province would be involved in monitoring invasive mammals. So we wouldn't specifically do like any control for invasive mammals, and it really depends on the species. Yeah, so that's just that question about who controls invasive mammal species in the area. Okay. And somebody else asked, what is our recommendation for removing knotweed? So knotweed is actually the only plant that the province recommends just purely using herbicide, because as far as we know, there's no other control methods available yet that can control it. So knotweed evolved in the Himalayan region, where it actually has the ability to push up through cooled lava. So that's why it can push up through concrete. And this means that it's just really, really hard to control. And 0.8 of a gram of the roots can start a new plant. So even if you've tried to dig out the whole infestation, it can still come back, and it can come back years later. So yeah, it's a really tough one to control. And unfortunately, one of the only options that we know of is herbicide. Yeah, and then somebody's asked if we can burn them once they're pulled. I'm not sure if you're talking about specifically knotweed or any invasive species, but the best thing to do is just to dispose of them at the landfill. Not all. I know there's definitely some invasive species that even if you burn them, the seeds are still viable. So you risk just having those seeds popping up. And somebody else asked if I can talk a bit more about Scottish broom or Scotch broom. So we don't have much of that in our area. So that's more common around, I know there's actually a bit in the Kootenay region, but on the coast. And yeah, it's a tough one to control. And I believe it increases fire hazard. It has volatile oils in it. And yeah, I can probably follow up with some more information about Scotch broom if you'd like. I think it should be on our top invasive plants poster that I will send out. Just cognizant of time here. We've got 3 minutes left. I just wanted to let you know that we have 2 more workshops coming up. So there's one on May 19th and then on May 27th, and they're both at 10 a.m. One is focused on pollination networking for your garden. So you'll learn a lot about pollinators and how you can support them by planting native species and what the best species are to plant to support pollinators. And then the other one is invasive plants with yellow flowers. That one's on May 27th. Yeah, so I think that'll probably be it for now. And as I mentioned, I'll definitely be following up, hopefully within the next few days, with some resources for you and with the recording of this webinar. So thanks everyone for coming, and it was great to see so many people. Yeah, and if you're not in our region, you can definitely connect with your local invasive species society. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. That was excellent.
Yeah, you're welcome. And feel free to reach out to us as well. Maybe I'll just put our contact info there. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can call us or send an email to info@columbiashuswaps.org. And you can also visit our website. And we've got a lot of great information there. Cool. So thanks everyone for coming, and hope you all have a great day.